Hello everyone, I am doing my presentation on human germline gene therapy. I read an article by David Resnick titled Debunking the Slippery Slope Argument Against Human Germline Gene Therapy. So here's a short agenda for the presentation just so you know where we're gonna go and what to expect. First, I'm going to cover what germline gene therapy is, the parental autonomy argument, the slippery slope argument, harm to future generations, social and economic injustices, risk argument, and then the diminished genetic and diversity argument. So I will start by going over the differences between the two types of human germline gene therapy. In genetic modification of early stage embryos, that's when the egg is fertilized in vitro, the genome is altered, and then the embryo is inserted into the uterus. Genetic modification of parental germ cells is when the parent's germ cells are manipulated, which then makes genetically altered gametes. Parental germ cell gene therapy is very risky, and it would be impossible to ensure that the gametes did not suffer a defect during meiosis, and it would be impossible to make sure that all of the gametes are the same. So it was left out of consideration for his essay. Also, Resnick does not consider screening and selecting embryos as gene therapy. He considers it to be eugenics, but he does not consider it gene therapy because we're not actually changing any of the genetic information. We're not adding, substituting, or deleting any genes. We're simply sorting through them. So for that reason, he left that out as well. Resnick realizes that human germline gene therapy, or HGLGT as I'll refer to it from here on out, is currently not safe or cost-effective. That's why he does not support us using it now. Whether the technology reaches that point or not, the effects of HGLGT should be investigated to determine if it should ever be used. This is why Resnick makes the assumption that at some point, HGLGT will be relatively safe with no more risk than natural human reproduction, and fairly cost-effective. It may not be equally available cost-wise to everyone in the society, but he will cover that a little bit later. Also, the slippery slope argument hinges on the assumption that HGLGT will be safe and cost-effective, at least at some point in the future. So we need to make that assumption before we can proceed. So parents have the right to raise their children as they see fit. They can make decisions about their health or their education or their welfare. Human germline gene therapy could definitely be used to promote health. We can use it to eradicate diseases or make people stronger, healthier, and more intelligent. So it can definitely be used to promote health. Parents also have the right to provide their children with opportunities or gifts that will benefit them. If parents can give their children a higher education or a car or even a nose job, why shouldn't it be allowed for them to give them enhanced genes? The common definition for negative eugenics is inhibiting biologically unfit parents from reproducing, while positive eugenics is promoting the reproduction of biologically fit parents. For the purposes of this essay, Resnick presents slightly different definitions. He refers to negative eugenics as manipulating the genome to eradicate disease. And positive eugenics is altering the genome to enhance humans. So rather than inhibit or promote people from reproducing, we're just looking at it as negative is eradicating disease and positive is enhancing humans. According to this essay, the slippery slope argument states that we should not engage in an otherwise justifiable activity if it will most likely lead to us engaging in an unjustifiable activity. As Resnick interprets it, there are actually two slippery slopes when analyzing HGLGT. The slope from negative eugenics to positive eugenics, and the slope from justified positive eugenics to immoral or unjust positive eugenics. So The first slope is where we start by trying to eradicate disease, but because of temptation, we end up enhancing humans. The second slope is that there are justifiable positive eugenics in Resnick's view, and he wants us to be allowed to do the positive eugenics. He is concerned, or the argument rather, is that the slippery slope will lead us from the justified positive eugenics to the immoral or unjust positive eugenics, which is what Hitler did with things like the Aryan race. So Resnick posits that he says that the first slope is unavoidable. He thinks that's definitely going to happen, but he doesn't think that the second slope necessarily has to happen. His stance is that for the second slope, if there's proper education and legislation, that we can prevent the justified positive eugenics from deteriorating into a situation where immoral positive eugenics is being used. Okay, we will now turn our attention to the effects of eugenics on individuals. We will examine the likely effects on both individuals who have been genetically modified and those who have not. Genetically enhanced individuals may have lower self-worth because they view themselves as an artifact of their parents' desires rather than a unique individual. Resnick finds that the biggest flaw in this argument is that self-worth is not completely determined by genetics. Rather, it is a combination of genetic and environmental factors. Resnick uses the identical twin argument as an example. Identical twins have identical genomes, clearly, but they grow into two different people with different interests, different views, and even different levels of self-worth. He claims that if we educate genetically enhanced individuals about themselves, we can avoid issues of low self-worth tied to those enhancements. Another concern raised is the effect of HG-LGT on individuals who have not been genetically altered. They may feel inferior because they may be less intelligent, athletic, or beautiful than people who have been enhanced genetically. People with birth defects or disabilities may feel like an underclass or that they are defective compared to those that who have been enhanced, which that could clearly be very damaging. Resnick combats this argument by claiming that if you suffer psychosocial harm because others have items or attributes that you do not, it is not grounds to justify denying those who are benefiting. Such as if you don't have access because you don't have the income for, say, a higher education. It doesn't make sense that nobody should be allowed to seek higher education just because you can't afford it. Now that we've covered the effects of eugenics on the individual, we will delve into the societal effects. An argument against eugenics voices the concern of an elite class forming, or perhaps different castes based on levels of genetic enhancement. This is kind of a tower theory, thinking that the genetically enhanced individuals will be at the top of the society, slowly trickling down to those who have not been genetically enhanced at all. Resnick posits that this can be avoided if a couple of rules are followed. The first is that all people have the same rights, liberties, and basic freedoms. This is to ensure that there are no extra liberties or rights attached to HG-LGT. He wants to make sure that it is not required for anybody to get genetically enhanced, nor that it's not necessarily a temptation. You can get that if you feel so inclined, but you don't have to. You still have the same rights and freedoms as everybody else, even if you choose to not genetically enhance your children. The second rule states that the privilege of HG-LGT, it has to be made available to everyone in the society. It would lead to, inequalities if, say, one person could get these enhancements, that HG-LGT was available to them, but other members of the society couldn't. There is the argument that says that people with low income would not be able to afford genetic enhancement. But Resnick actually brings this point up later and has an argument against that. He just wants to make sure that we can limit prejudice by not allowing certain members of the society to have any extra rights. They can have a privilege that they might be able to afford that others can't, but that privilege must be made available to everybody in the society, even if it's not necessarily feasible for them to afford it. Okay. We will actually go back here and talk about another example. So this is one of the examples that he has about the limited financial means. So he offers an example of someone who's born with very poor eyesight. So poor eyesight is a genetic disease of sorts. And let's say that this person has limited financial means and that they cannot afford seeing glasses to improve their vision. They might feel inferior and might experience prejudice, but it would not be justified to outlaw glasses completely to ease these possible feelings. Resnick suggests legislation to ensure that the two rules are followed, and even mentions that we could use governmental programs that could assist. So we could use things like Medicaid to assist in covering genetic enhancements that other people couldn't afford. This legislation and governmental programs would help to further assuage perceived social injustices that might arise from HGLGT. So I think that Resnick's reasoning is susceptible to two arguments. First is the risk argument. There is still much that we do not know about eugenics. There's a great potential for there to be long-term risks that we simply do not know enough about to try to preemptively combat. This goes along with his assumption was that at some point in time that it will be safe and cost-effective. I think that he went out kind of over the line with that assumption that it will be safe. And really, even if it is safe, like at that time, I think that there are long-term issues that we need to look at. There may be long-term risks to our health that we may not even know enough about to expect that that could be a problem. We need to look at these things. I think that the risk of these things that we don't know is definitely an issue in allowing HGLGT. And then the other argument that I see the other flaw in Resnick's argument is the diminished genetic diversity argument. So this is one in which a single gene can code for more than one trait. There may be traits that are viewed as less desirable. It would be expected that these less desirable traits would be selected against, which would lead to a decrease in the occurrence of both the targeted trait and the incidental trait. As you can see, over many generations, this would lead to a decrease in genetic diversity. An example of this is the French bulldog. They have been selectively bred for so many generations that they suffer from various genetic maladies. According to Wikipedia, 80% of French bulldogs are brought into this world via cesarean section because of genetic issues that affect the ability of natural birth. Surely, it was not our intention to make bulldogs nearly incapable of live birth, but it was an unknown side effect caused by selecting for particular traits over many generations. Overall, I think that Resnick makes a really compelling argument for the use of regulated eugenics and human germline gene therapy. And I even might count myself as a supporter, but until the risk argument and the diminished genetic diversity argument have been properly debunked, I can't quite count myself a supporter quite yet. So that has been my presentation. I hope that you guys have a fantastic fall break. I will be in Mexico for the next week, but I will be more than happy to answer all discussion thread comments when I return. Thank you so much and have a great day.